Today, my guest is Dmitry Salita. Dmitry Salita and I go a long way back. I, as a kid, started a company. When I was 14 years old, I started a business, Golden Gear Boxing, and I sold boxing gloves throughout the U.S., especially in the world, but definitely throughout the U.S., to local gyms, fight stores, online, etc. My biggest passion still to this day is boxing, and when I was 14, I decided to turn that into a business, and I was selling boxing gloves to tons of professional fighters all over the world. I had looked up to Dmitry for a long time from a distance. Professional fighter, up and coming, had an incredible story, and I had reached out to him because I wanted to do a photo shoot with him and my company. Long story short, I got in touch with him and we had a funny conversation. You know, he said I was very persistent, which is still true to this day. And, you know, a few days later, I met him at Start City with his mentor and coach, Jimmy O'Farrow, and my dad and our photographer went, and we did a photo shoot with Dmitry, as well as my first kickboxing coach, Val Stoyanov. And Dmitry has an incredible story. And I was so honored to have the chance to speak with him on this podcast to talk about his journey, his life as a professional fighter, life after fighting, and something we actually never spoke about, in all honesty, until this podcast, grief. Dmitry lost his mom at a young age, and you know, Dmitry and I actually never had discussed anything about his mom, loss, or anything in that regard. And I am so grateful for Dmitry coming onto the show and speaking so honestly and openly about his feelings, his perspective, and so much on this podcast. It really requires a certain amount of bravery to speak so openly about things that are so real and genuine, and I'm so grateful. So for those of you that don't know, Salita is a former professional boxer, world title challenger, and now founder of Salita Promotions. Dmitry Salita had an incredible record. He, today, as a promoter, his promotion, Salita Promotions, features some of the best young prospects and establishing contenders in North America and worldwide. Some of his biggest names to date are Clarissa Shields and many, many more fighters. He was born in the Ukraine, grew up in New York City, and from age of 9, Salita started boxing. Salita was one of the many incredible boxers that came out of Start City Boxing Club, which was run by the incredible man Jimmy O'Farrow, which we dive into on this show. Dmitry had an incredible professional career. He fought for a world title and retired with a record of 35 wins by way of knockout, 2 losses, 1 draw. I first met Dmitry when I was building my first business, Golden Gear, at the age of 14. And as a young Jewish kid who loved boxing, I greatly admired Dmitry, both as a boxer and because of his heritage as a Jew and his background. Over the years, I've tried to help Dmitry in his career when he first started promoting. And, you know, I hope one day I could somehow collaborate with him down the road. To this date, I still look up to Dmitry. He embodies the fighting spirit on, and it was really a true honor to have him on this show. So with that, hope you enjoy. Make sure, as always, leave a review if you like this, share it, and thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Dmitry, thanks for taking the time to connect today. You know, I guess prior to all the technical difficulties, I was telling you a little bit about, you know, why I decided to start this podcast. And I really wanted to start this podcast to create a platform where I can help inspire people to build a life they love and ultimately overcome adversity, obstacles that life will throw at them. And, you know, I know you know my story, but I lost my dad to cancer when I was 20 and my mom 5 years later to a rare cancer. And a lot of that inspired me to, I guess, really push me to think introspectively. What is it I want to do in this world? What do I want to ultimately create? What do I want to build? And how do I want to live a life that I love, knowing that our time here on earth is limited? And I guess, fortunately, you know, I started to think of all these things through a series of unfortunate events and losing my parents. But that's really what inspired me to start this podcast, to try to create a platform to be a beacon of hope for others who are facing adversity, struggles, etc. And I guess I found it pretty fascinating that just as I'm telling you all this before, you said that, building a life you love is something that we strive for, but very hard to do. And I guess before we even like dive into all the good stuff, actually, I wanted to understand better what you meant by that.
First of all, it's nice to connect with you. I've known you for many years, and it's interesting experience for me to communicate with you vis-a-vis this platform and vis-a-vis your podcast. When I met you almost 20 years ago, you were a young and aspiring businessman, and always great to communicate with you, and I'm happy to be on this podcast.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the most important things is to enjoy what you do for your work, and because that takes up a tremendous amount of our time. I've been blessed to have grown up in boxing, have a real true passion for it, and when my career started to wind down as a fighter, I began promoting my own fights, really with that goal in mind at the moment, and then slowly started to morph into a business. And while very challenging at times, and certainly all startups are very tough and lots of difficulties, boxing is a very unique business. There's very few people that can truly survive doing it, and thank God that there's been significant progress, and that that we work with great fighters and television networks and are able to get our fights viewed and televised to the fans, and it is truly a something that I enjoy every early morning and every late night. So yeah, I've been blessed that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can find what you're good at and what you love, and you're able to do that professionally, I think that's absolutely, a blessing.
No doubt about it.
So I know you, as you mentioned, for several years now. And, since I'm a little kid, I was always inspired by you, your story, your journey. And as I'm sitting here preparing for this podcast the last few days, I've read so much about you, and I guess I'm even more fascinated now because there were so many parts of your story that maybe I've read or heard or knew, but as I dug deeper into your story, I think it's such a fascinating and interesting and amazing, inspiring story journey that you've been on. So maybe just to take it back, I usually like to start these from the beginning, which starts at childhood. So you grew up in Odessa, and I read your family moved here when you were around 9 years old.
Yes, my family moved to Brooklyn, New York when I was 9 years old in 1991.
What was it like growing up in Odessa?
Well, it was a different lifestyle. I remember it vaguely. I remember time spent with my parents, remember houses we grew up in, remember having a cat and a dog. And, then coming here and kind of, comparing and contrasting the things that we had and the lifestyle, and seeing the differences, and obviously growing up in Brooklyn, seeing the differences in culture and getting Americanized, that was quite a process.
Yeah, and when you were in Odessa, I read your family moved because greater opportunity, but also there was still quite a bit of anti-Semitism going on at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it was kind of an uncertain time. I think shortly after we left, there was no more Soviet Union. And, those years leading up to that, there was a great amount of uncertainty. And, and during that time, there was a great wave of Russian Jewish immigration. All of my extended family left the United States, some to Israel, mostly to the United States. And, and we followed suit. My father's grandmother and his brother came to the United States in 1979. That was kind of the first wave of Russian Jewish immigration, and then in 1991 we followed, and my mother's side, my uncle, my aunts, everybody came to the U.S.
Okay. When you got to the U.S., I guess, do you remember, was that like a very challenging time? Because you're around 9 years old, so I imagine that it's quite difficult. Did you speak English at the time, or you came here and almost learned everything from scratch?
No, I didn't speak any English. I mean, culturally it was exciting for a little bit amount of time to kind of see new things, and it was obviously, but once you get past that excitement, it was obviously challenging. And I remember being in the big airport in Moscow, boarding the Delta plane, never being exposed to something like that before. That was very exciting. But one of the things that I remember, we landed in JFK, and I've watched movies of the United States, and my impression of it was seeing big buildings everywhere. And I remember driving down Bell Parkway and just kind of seeing, nothing really. I was like, man, this is New York City. But
Oh,
that was my first surprise.
I got it. Um, I can only imagine what the feeling's like getting on that plane, coming to a new country, leaving your hometown behind, leaving your family, much of your family, your friends, etc., and coming here. I can only imagine. I read actually that the first time you watched a boxing fight, it was a Tyson fight, and you were around 5, so you were still in Odessa then.
Yes.
Were you instantly like enamored with the sport, or is that just your first memory of watching boxing?
Well, I don't remember if my first fight was Rocky versus Ivan Drago or Tyson versus somebody. I do remember that I watched the Rocky movie in the wintertime, and I put on my boots and I went running.
I love that.
The music inspired me.
Got it. But you weren't boxing yet at that time.
I was not boxing. I was not physically strong kid growing up. So my parents would take me to different sports clubs. And at about 7 years old, I joined 7, 8, I think 7. I joined a karate club, and I really became very interested in it from the beginning. It was very, very difficult, very tough. And, at that time, karate was also kind of underground. Karate was banned for many years in the Soviet Union. So it was just kind of emerging, and it was kind of a cool thing to do. But, but the trainers had a very tough mentality. It was very, very discipline oriented, very, very difficult training sessions, even when you were a kid. So I remember, certain things stick out in your mind. And I remember every Sunday we used to go on these long jogs from the gym to the beach. And it was probably 4 miles.
Okay, but you're a young kid.
Yeah, but you're a young kid. And I just had, I just remember being at the end of the pack, my first couple of Sundays and feeling that I was going to die,
Yeah.
But you get through it and you get stronger, and then you run with the pack.
Makes sense. So once you're in the U.S. and you're here, you're getting settled, did you take back up karate, or how did you end up first starting to box?
Yeah, so I went to Paul Mormando's Karate Academy, which was located on Bedford Avenue X. Well, initially I wanted to go right. I mean, I was really strongly inspired by karate and was really into it. And when we first came here for a couple of months, my parents didn't really have the money to take me to a karate place, karate dojo. But after about 6 months, 5, 6 months, they had enough money to send me to karate for 1 class a week. But Paul, took a liking to me, and he allowed me to come, twice a week and then 3 times a week. And then I would come every day, and he would have like kid classes and adult classes. So he would allow me to stay from like 5 to 9. So I would stay through all those classes. I was really motivated, really inspired, to be a great fighter in karate. And Paul, recognized some talent in me, and actually my older brother Michael, and Paul enlisted me in the Junior Olympics, which was a boxing tournament. So I really had my first boxing fight while still training at the karate place.
And were you training in only boxing, or you were still throwing kicks and doing more traditional karate?
But I was training boxing in a karate place,
okay.
So it wasn't really proper kind of training.
I see.
And a little while after that, I fought some kickboxing fights, and I beat this kid whose name was Alexei Garjula, who was 8-0 or 9-0. He had several titles, very respected guy. And after that, I knew that it was time for me to transfer sports, to transfer into boxing. And I lived on 2728 Kings Highway, which is kind of against the Flatbush area. And I called around different boxing gyms. And the 2 most known places were Gleason's Gym, which was located in Dumbo, and Starrett City Boxing Club, which is located in Starrett City, part of Brooklyn. But Gleason's you had to pay membership for. And Starrett City was free. It was a city program that allowed kids to train there for free. So, and also it was closer to where I lived. So I visited Starrett City Boxing Club. I remember it was in the summertime, and I walked into the gym. It was in a basement. It was very, very hot. And I just, if today I would have to draw a painting of that view, I would be able to draw it, because it's just the atmosphere, the smell, the environment just mesmerized me. I was like in a candy store, really, really inspired and taken aback in a good way. And I went downstairs. I met a gentleman there, and he said, "It's Friday. come back on Monday. We'll sign you up." And as I was walking up, it's not even a staircase. It's a ramp. And as I was walking up the ramp, Jimmy O, who I didn't really know as Jimmy O back then, was sitting outside with some trainers, and he said, "Hey, young fella, what are you doing here?" I said, "I came to join the boxing gym." He said, "Okay, so what did they tell you?" I said, "They told me to come back on Monday to get the application." He said, No. Come with me. I'm going to give you the application now, and you'll bring it back filled out on Monday, and then you'll be ready to start training." So I was very excited, got the application, filled it out, came back on Monday at 5 o'clock, which is the gym was 5 to 8, and there was a process of kind of getting initiated, and the first trainer of all the new kids was a man by the name of Mr. Tate. Mr. Tate was probably in his late 70s by then, but very fit, walked with a cane, but not because he needed to, but just as a style statement, you know?
Okay.
Well dressed, he could do push-ups, he could do pull-ups, OG, like really, And he taught me showed me the boxing stance, and he would always say to everybody, he said, "I'm gonna tell you a little secret now, just for you." And he said, "When you jab, hide your chin behind the shoulder." He'd teach me to step forward, step back, jab, right hand. A couple of days went by, and there was a Russian trainer in the gym whose name was Yasha Springer. And Jimmy was the director, and he kind of managed the environment. After Mr. Tate kind of broke me in, he put me together with Yasha. And one of the interesting things about Starrett City Boxing Club, those that follow the boxing world may know some of the names that I will mention, but Starrett City Boxing Club at that time, even though it was one gym, it had like 5 or 6 different trainers in there with their own teams, where the fighters inside the gym, they had a lot of competitive animosity towards one another, let's say, and it was very competitive, very good fighters, very difficult environment to survive in as a fighter. So Yasha had his group. Then there was Andre Rozier, who's one of the best trainers in boxing now. He had his crew. There was Nirmal Lorik, who was also one of the best trainers. He's been out for a little bit, but he had some world champions. He had his crew. He actually had Louis Collazo then, and Travis Sims. And Jimmy had a little bit of his crew, and there were other trainers. Zab Judah was there. Junior Jones would come by. Sharon Briggs, Monty Barrett, Louis Collazo, Curtis Stevens. Victor Roundtree was a trainer then. Danny Jacobs was a little bit later, not when I started, but he came about 4 or 5 years after me. Saddam Ali, also about 3-4 years after me. A lot of great fighters.
Yeah, like elite, really elite fighters.
Truly elite, world champions.
World class.
Not only world champions, I mean, some of the best pound-for-pound fighters, in all the sport. I mean, really incredible environment. And summertime in Starrett City Boxing Club was extremely hot. I remember it had no heat and it had no air conditioning. So in the summertime, there was no running water in the gym. So there was a desk with jugs. And when the rounds were over, so it's 3 minutes of training, 1 minute of rest. During the rest, there was, let's say, 5 jugs, and there was 40 people or 30 people. And people would come to the desk and jug down the water, one by one. And I don't think anyone got sick.
Pre-corona, yeah, pre-corona.
For sure, pre-corona. Yes.
How old were you when you first stepped into Starrett City?
I was 13 years old.
And I know Jimmy O played, if not the greatest, one of the greatest influences in your life. So I'm curious, so it sounds like he took a liking to you from the beginning. How did that evolve, I guess, as the time went on when you started to develop a relationship with him and get closer with him?
Well, Jimmy was a great trainer, a philosopher, a real unsung hero of the community, and just did so many things to help so many people. I obviously stood out. I was a white boy, the only one in a competing team of Starrett City Boxing Club. I was an immigrant. I didn't really speak English great at that point. Was still learning the culture. And Jimmy obviously, observed my work ethic and my similarities, my differences within the gym. And he took a liking to me. My father and my mother initially for the first year, and my brother used to drive me. So Jimmy developed a relationship with them. And I mean, my parents really felt comfortable with Jimmy. They felt that he was responsible and that he truly cared for me.
Okay.
And Jimmy, you know, slowly started to form a relationship with me. We began to have conversations. Jimmy would call me and tell me about boxing and a lot of the great fighters. And then, and then as time went on, Yasha left the gym, and there were some changes, and Jimmy, really took over training me really full time. And that wasn't only, just boxing training. I mean, it was boxing training, but meaning that it wasn't just the physical exercise of going to hitting the bag and things like that. But it was a lot of, a lot of mental training, a lot of philosophy, a lot of, just a lot of things about life. And I had the chance for years, to just hang out with Jimmy, and go hang out with him and his group of friends, be in certain environments that someone from my background would never really be exposed to on such an intimate level.
Yeah.
And I've seen Jimmy, obviously, been through the times when he always used to tell me being boss is a difficult thing. And, and Jimmy, as you know, the boxing community sometimes attracts certain types of folks, and, and Jimmy always had to manage that and make it a safe and productive environment in Stereo City Boxing Club. And sometimes people's egos, would flare up, and and it was territorial in some ways, and there was only one ring. And I got to tell you, it was just such an intense and such an incredible place, at Stereo City Boxing Club. And so many. I mean, it was just like, people say the school of hard knocks. I mean, it was really, but on so many levels, I mean, and it would attract, obviously, once in a while you'd get, some business folks, some CEOs that would come maybe once every 2 weeks and whatever. And it was because it was such a hotbed of talent. So one of the things that was consistent with Stereo City Boxing Club is there was a line of cars in second parking. For those that live in New York City know what it means. For those that don't, may not. Like you in Michigan, they don't know what second parking is. Anyway, so usual cars like Chrysler, Fords, but once in a while you'd see like a Lincoln or a Mercedes or a Lexus or a Bentley, and you'd be like, man, somebody important's in the gym. And and you walk in and it'd be Floyd Mayweather came to the gym, by the way, in 1996 with Zab Judah after the Olympics. I remember meeting Floyd in Stereo City Boxing Club, actually, for the first time. So it was just what an environment. Winter, so we talked about the summertime. Wintertime, there was no heat. And there was no bathroom. You go to the bathroom, you would have to go.
It was like in the parking garage, no?
Correct, yes, it was in a parking garage. And for the first year, I got rides, and then after a year, I had to take the bus. And it was the B82 bus. I would take it on Kings Highway and Ocean Avenue, and I would take it for about 40 minutes to an hour. And the last stop was Pennsylvania Avenue, Stereo City. So usually when I would get to the gym in the wintertime, I'd have to go to the bathroom before I start training. So the gym was so cold, and you go inside that bathroom. The bathroom had heat, and you warm your hands up, get a little warm, and then you would start warming up many times in a really heavy sweatshirt or a jacket, and then as you go on, you get warmer and things start rolling. Can't cook with cold grease.
I really can only imagine. I've only been in the gym once, and that was the first time we met, and that was the first and only time that I had met Jimmy O. But I just remember, and I was young then, but I remember I was with my dad as well as the photographer. We were doing the photo shoot with you, and I remember Jimmy O had story after story, and I remember both my dad as well as the photographer, Rob at the time, I remember everyone being like, a movie needs to be made about Jimmy O. He had so many stories and so many lessons, I guess, from just the experience meeting him. I remember him sharing so many stories and lessons, I guess, from his own life experiences. And I remember him being such a really like a fascinating human being.
Oh, he was a wealth of knowledge, and he grew up through different kind of social changes in the United States. He's seen things change, and the older I get, the wiser Jimmy becomes. And I thank God that I have many of his lessons still ring in my ear, that I still have recollection of many of the lessons that he taught me. And when I was listening to many of them, they kind of didn't really make sense because I didn't really encounter the experiences that he was talking about.
Mm.
And being in the business of boxing, a lot of times dealing with certain situations, things happen, and I just kind of laughed to myself about Jimmy, pointing this thing out or that thing out. And one of the things that I want to say is like mentorship is so important. Jimmy really believed in me, and I think that during my difficult times in my life, that really helped me and really encouraged me, and helped me believe in myself. And that's one additional thing that I'm grateful for to Jimmy O.
Would you say that like his mentorship overall, I guess I'm curious, is there, and I know that he's had such a profound impact on your life, but I'm curious, is there like one thing that you really carry with you on a day-to-day basis, something that he's given you, or I guess left you with? Is there anything in particular, or there's just too much to say one thing?
One of Jimmy's favorite things was the Lord works in strange ways. And ain't that the truth, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So from what I understand, once you were here, your mom got sick, correct?
Yeah.
She was diagnosed with breast cancer, from what I understand, when you were already in the States.
Well, I think she had it when we left, but it was diagnosed here, yes.
Got it. How old were you around that time?
I was 9 years old.
Okay, so she was diagnosed when you were around 9. So when she was diagnosed, you're obviously a young kid, so did you understand, I guess, what was going on?
No, at that time I didn't understand what was going on. I mean, I saw my mother going to the doctor, being bold for a certain point of time because of chemotherapy and radiation, but she was still functioning, and I didn't really understand the extent of the illness at that time when I was 9 years old. I only truly understood it as I got older and when she relapsed.
And she was sick for I read 2 years?
A little under 2 years, yeah. The relapse was after the 5-year relapse, she was sick, yeah, for a little under 2 years.
Got it. Okay. And I guess so you're a young kid. So how did you cope with everything that was going on when she was sick, and I guess ultimately when she passed?
It was very difficult. I've always felt that I was a spiritual person. I always believed in God. My focus in boxing gave me strength and gave me inspiration, and that's something that I kind of where I pointed my energy towards. But you just take it day by day, and truly challenging time. And something that I think about, now that I'm older and have a family myself, something that I think about those times, and being young, being 14 years old, and dealing with some of those situations. It was truly challenging, but sometimes when you're in the storm, you don't think about, you just think about covering up and making sure that you get through the day, So
yeah,
and a lot of times the effects of that and the real feelings associated with that, are felt after. So it's fight or flight, and you have to fight because at that time my mother depended on me, my family depended on me, and I just had to do my best to keep it together and to be constructive and to be as productive as I could be. I had a deep faith in God.
Was your family observant? Was your family religious?
No, my family was not at all observant, meaning that they were just a regular Soviet family. No, nothing. We didn't grow up with any observance. The only observance that we did have is, we're now in the Passover season. So I remember that my father used to buy Passover. My father used to buy matzah on Passover. That was the extent of our observance. And my grandmother, whose name was Ita, who was my mother's mother, who we grew up with, who lived in a house next to us, she went to Cheder. She went to a Jewish school when she was a kid before the start of communism. She saw her parents being killed because they were Jews. She hid under the bed, and she saw her father and her mother being killed. She had, during World War II, during hunger, some of her kids died. So she's really been through a lot. She was a religious lady. She knew certain things and kept certain things to her best knowledge and to her best abilities, being where we were. But I remember when we came to the United States, every Yom Kippur, she would go to the synagogue and she would sit there morning to night. And she was, in her late 70s, older lady. She gave us inspiration and gave me early knowledge of that, to the extent that she could.
Okay. So I guess when your mom was sick, were you observant or you were more spiritual and you had a deep connection and faith with religion and God, or you really started to develop your thoughts around religion and your feelings more when your mom was sick?
Well, when I came to Brooklyn, New York, it was the first time that I saw, religious Jewish people walking around the streets and, kind of openly being Jewish. I've never really experienced that before. And, being spiritual, I've tried to approach and go into synagogues and different religious organizations. I never really felt inspired. It never struck a light in me in that way, in a constructive way. And one day I came to visit my mother, and she was rooming with a Orthodox religious lady, and the lady's husband came to visit, was with his wife, and we were there for the whole day. And when you're in the same room, you strike a conversation, and we started talking about life and about God and about challenges and about different things. And this man was a very warm man, nice guy, older gentleman, and he took my information and gave it to a local Chabad rabbi. And at that time, I didn't know the difference between the different kind of groups in Judaism. And this rabbi, whose name is Rabbi Zalman Lieberhoff, and it was Chabad of Flatbush, began to contact me himself and through some of the folks that worked for him. And, I didn't really feel comfortable because I didn't have great experiences before that. And I just didn't feel comfortable for many reasons to communicate with him on a consistent basis. But he was very warm and consistent. And one day, probably as a result of some challenges with my mother's health, I went to the synagogue, and I went during the week, and I saw there, some folks that were dressed more religiously, some folks that were dressed in regular secular clothes, and they were all, together and communicating. And I just felt a certain aura of holiness, of goodness, of harmony, and it inspired me. And slowly but surely, I started to come back and started to learn a little bit about myself and about my roots as a Jewish person. And I was, also very, very serious about boxing, and the two kind of really intertwined in my life at that time, and really one helped the other. Obviously, besides dealing with my mother, I was also starting to really come into my own as a boxer, and was starting to compete at a fairly high level. And, boxing is a lonely sport. I mean, and even competing at a high level, being in the gym every day with those guys that were killers, man, that were the best, really, really tough guys.
Yeah, monsters.
I mean, really, man, incredible fighters. I remember particularly when we used to box, like with Curtis Stevens, the gym used to stop because we had such wars, man. It was just like, it was for bragging rights every day, like 3 times a week. It was incredible. It was just an incredible experience. Anyway, but when you're in the ring and when the other man wants to truly take your head off, that builds a certain, it's really truly fight or flight. And that developed my spirituality and made me get in touch with that, every time I step into the ring. So
I see. So it sounds like boxing and religion went hand in hand for you.
For sure.
So I'm curious, obviously your mom passed away, and I guess like today as a result, as someone who is observant, very connected with spirituality and God, I'm curious to get your thoughts around, like, do you believe everything happens for a reason? Or like, where do you net out on that? I'm so intrigued, given like your background and connection to spirituality.
I read your article about that some time ago. So, does everything happen for a reason? Yes, everything happens for a reason. But sometimes we don't necessarily understand and see that reason. That in itself is a challenging process, but it is a positive one, because that leads to being positive and being constructive. If in each situation you do whatever you can to, to mend it or to make it positive or to deal with it in the best kind of way, and then whatever happens. Some things are outside of your control. So yes, everything happens for a reason, for sure. I deeply believe that. And again, and when challenging things happen in your life, it's very hard to. Well, it's not even hard. It's just like you don't even want to listen to that. It's just like, sometimes you're just so deep in your pain that that's all there is,
So looking back, maybe not in the moment, but as a child, maybe now looking back, even if it was all you knew, I'm sure you can attest that you had a challenging like childhood. You moved here from another country, didn't speak English. You and your family built a life here.
I just want to talk about that experience a little bit more because you brought it up, and one of the things that made me feel whole in Sarah City Boxing Club is most of those kids from East New York, from Brownsville, from very tough areas. I remember when we first came here, we were on food stamps and welfare. Then food stamps, now you get cards. So people, thank God for that. So people can't really tell, if you're struggling. But back in those days, food stamps were just dollar bills that looked different. They looked like food stamps. And first of all, I remember being in a fruit store and Woolbaum's, which I think may no longer be around, popular chain of food stores in New York City. And there was these packets of fruits and vegetables mixed together, and some of them were rotten, some of them not so good, and whatever. It was 69 cents. And I remember, my mother buying those, and I remember staying in line and paying with food stamps and just feeling so embarrassed by it. It's just like, because you're so different, And and when I was in Stereo City Boxing Club, we would go to tournaments, and you win, you get a T-shirt, you get a free meal, you get whatever, you get a trophy, you get something, you get a sweatsuit, and that social struggle, that forms a mindset. So I was really fighting to come out of my ghetto, you know what I mean, to come out of my poverty, and sharing the gym with like-minded individuals, kids and grown-ups that understood the process of being poor, that understood the struggle of being poor. And in some ways, as a kid growing up in the Soviet Union, just from parents talking and from older folks, because I didn't really get to experience it because I was too young, but you get the sense that Jewish people were second class, that they didn't get the treatment that other people got, and didn't get the opportunities, So, being in the gym at that time and getting really kind of really early in my Americanization process, and being able to get respect and form a relationship with these different folks. And Jimmy O, truly playing a pivotal role in me being able to express myself and express my identity, when I got a chance to get out there and to get some press and to get, to get my 15 minutes of fame. I felt that it was my opportunity to be very open about who I was, about my Judaism, and to use my boxing experience as a platform to let people know and to make people feel proud about it, about who they are. And, America is the greatest country in the world, because no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, if you work hard, you will have the best chance to make it. You may not make it because life happens, and sometimes, things out of our control intertwine. However, the best chance to make it is in America, because if you work hard and if you got talent, you got smarts and perseverance, who you are will not stand in your way. And that's an incredible thing. And I'm very blessed to be here, and I'm very grateful that my parents brought me here. And today is the year anniversary of Claressa Shields versus Christina Hammer. Today is April 13th, which is the biggest fight in women's boxing history. And I had the honor of promoting it, and I know that I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah.
But just to connect it, I'm a kid that grew up in Odessa, came here, was on welfare, was on food stamps, and had a dream of making it in the boxing business as a fighter and then as a promoter. And it's really incredible that I was able to do it. Lots of challenges, lots of hard work, lots of tears, lots of black eyes. That's okay. That's part of life, But just to be able to have the opportunity to do it and to make it, and that's a compliment to this country, and really God bless America.
So far, a lot of the people that I've been connecting with have faced some significant tragedy or obstacle, adversity. A lot of people that I had interviewed thus far, they have lost someone significant in their life, whether that be a parent or a sibling. And I guess, specifically in the context of thinking sort of why bad things happen in general, or why bad things happen to good people. And I know you had mentioned that you read like the article I wrote. So I guess I'm curious why you believe everything happens for a reason.
Well, everything happens for a reason, but you make that choice. I think that individual makes the choice, talking about most difficult experiences, to kind of extract a lesson from it, and obviously understand the pain and deal with it constructively and in the best way that you can, and find the growth from it. That's really the only way to be able to move forward and be healthy. You have to find meaning in your experiences. I read a great book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which really talks about it. He talks about people, who've been through a Holocaust, who've been through concentration camps, and finding meaning in those challenges and in those pains. And everyone goes through their journey and through their moments of hell, so to say. But I can only talk about myself. And for me, it's been through those pivotal, difficult moments, I really try to find meaning in it, to find growth, and and to deal with it, in a productive way. And a lot of times, while it's happening, it's extremely difficult to do. But you know, sometimes self pity and these different things that come into play, and they want to tackle, the feelings of positivity and proactivity. Again, talking about myself, to go to the next level and to try to live a full life with the losses and with those difficulties. It's important.
So
It's been
really,
important for me to find the lesson and the growth in it, and move forward.
so really growing as a result of, I guess, whatever the adversity or the brick wall is in front of you.
Well, it's inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yeah, you have to fight.
Well, sometimes, I mean, like, I believe success comes from the blessing of God, obviously, and not to say that you don't have to work hard. So everyone has their talents and their, and ways that they have to realize themselves to the fullest. But ultimately, I believe that we're blessed with success, with positions and all that stuff. But I do want to say, however, the world is the world, and people go through their challenges, and and a lot of times to get to that position, to get to the top of the food chain, a lot of times you have to go through a lot of bitterness and a lot of pain, and people putting you down, and people being tough and nasty, and all these different things that people go through. And that can make somebody a nasty person. That can make somebody, resentful. Or those experiences can make someone resentful. Can make somebody bitter.
It sounds like maybe the hardest moments in your life, you've in some form grown as a result. Correct?
I've tried to do my best. And that's an everyday journey.
Yeah.
And not to say that I haven't been down, that I haven't had the blues, and that happens. That happens. That's part of the human experience.
Do you think that it's possible to, what you gain as a result of what you lose, or the challenge, the adversity that you face, do you think the only way to gain those lessons is by actually living through that hardship?
Well, I think the greatest teacher is experience. And there's nothing that you can learn like experience. There's nothing, nothing. They say to get ready for a good fight, you got to have great sparring partners. Emmanuel Stewart, one of the greatest trainers of all time. Freddie Roach, one of the greatest trainers of all time. They would pay sparring partners to try to knock down the star pupil. So only through tough challenges and through adversity do you get ready for a title fight. Do you get ready for the best?
Yeah.
So only experiences and hopefully it teaches empathy and teaches for others that go through it, and and teaches you things that one has to learn about themselves. And through pain and through struggle, and through whether it's poverty or emotional struggle or relationships. Sometimes it's circumstantial. Sometimes it's not on you. Sometimes, you're a result of other people's decision or whatever. But at the same time, to find the meaning in those circumstances, and try to move forward as a better man, as a more educated man, as a more experienced man.
I totally understand what you're saying, and actually I resonate with quite a bit because through my own, I guess, grief journey and my own losses in dealing with the loss of my parents, I feel I've greatly grown as a result. I feel for me, tragedy has been one of my greatest teachers in a sense, just to give me a better perspective on life. And I guess, sort of, as I mentioned before we started the podcast, really it's made me think, how do I want to spend the limited time I have here on Earth? So I can resonate with quite a bit of what you're saying.
Yeah. And obviously all of those experiences of struggle and pain and growth are individualized, and different things matter to different people, and different people digest them in ways that are meaningful to them.
But yeah, I hear you. I still struggle with, I guess, finding meaning in why the bad things happen. I'm sitting here and telling you that as a result of losing my parents, I've grown as a result of that. Without a doubt, there's a lot that I've gained. But I guess, where I struggle, or where I start to wrestle with this philosophy or this idea, is sort of around the why, like the meaning behind it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, those things are impossible to explain. It's impossible to explain. My mother passed away when I was 16 years old. She was 49. So I want to say that I could have learned many of those lessons in other ways. And so, but as a human being, I have limited comprehension, and I have a certain view of the world. But I understand that there's a lot of deeper and there's many dimensions to this, and there's no justification for it. There's no, I mean, a mother, a father is the closest people to us. So I can't say it's for the better. It's terrible. But for one to be, again, I'm talking about myself, to stay sane and to move on and to try to be active and to enjoy the things in your life that you can enjoy, you have to, when experiencing those challenges, try to do your best to help the person or the situation in the best way you can in every way until there's just no more to do. And then things happen that are outside of your control. And for one to be healthy and productive and to reach his potential, you just have to, in my opinion, grow from those experiences and try to be better and to be more mature and more experienced.
So, I've said this to numerous people before, and I really only try to look forwards because the past is the past. What happened, and I can't control even what's going to happen. I can only control the here and now, the present.
And that's a very high level to reach. To live in that mindset is very, I'm just talking about myself. It's difficult because obviously our mind wanders to the future and to the past and to what could have and should have and whatever. But like you said, the healthiest thing to do is obviously to focus on here and now and on the next, the next few steps. That is the healthiest way.
I really try my best to live in that mindset. And with that being said, admittedly, I will tell you time and time again that I guess I really believe deep down what I've gained as a result of my losses is significant. The perspective I have, the mindset I have, the way I am walking in my life today has really been, I think, profoundly, as weird as it sounds, and as terrible as it is of the losses that I've experienced, I really believe, I guess, deep down that I've really grown a lot, I guess, as a result. And I wouldn't change anything, even if I had the magic wand. I guess I'm happy with where I am today in that sense. I'm happy with who I'm becoming and I guess sort of how, unfortunately, again, the circumstances I've lived through are terrible, but in the here and now, I really am talking to you, a longtime friend, and I feel right now like I'm living in a blessing. I'm curious what your thoughts are around, if you could, it seems like, you've grown a lot as a result of your hardships. So would you change the circumstances if you can, or would you not, given what you've gained as a result of the hardships you faced? And I'm not just speaking around the loss of your mom.
Well, I gotta say there's some things that happened in one's, talking about myself again, that happened in my life that I may have not have understood yet and may have not come to peace with, some challenges and things, but there's nothing you can do. Well, sometimes when you're going through something, you wish that you can take a magic wand and say, how can this be better,
Yeah.
However, constructively, the only thing that we can do is to learn from those experiences and grow. And certain things you just can't change, and the only thing that we can change is ourselves, and that's a lifetime of work to be able to grow and to change yourself, meaning to grow constructively and productively as a human being. That's an everyday challenge. So I've had some challenges in my life that have helped me become the person that I am today and have helped me grow. Some of them I'm grateful for. I can see the growth that they have caused, and I can see the maturity and the experience that was the result of them. And some challenges were painful. They were just painful, and it was just, you just have to live and understand that happened. And maybe I wish that wouldn't happen to me. But there's nothing I could do, and it is what it is. And I have to accept destiny and accept circumstances and find meaning in it for myself and grow and move on to the next day.
Got it. Well, I appreciate you, speaking so deeply with me, obviously about a complex topic that I'm sure is very, it's an emotional topic as well. Just speaking around, having an honest conversation around the hardest things we've faced in life and reflecting on that for a few minutes.
It is, and I feel that because of our relationship that I'm able to, even though I know an unknown amount of people are going to listen to this, but because of my comfort level with you, I feel comfortable.
I appreciate your honesty and you opening up. So I wanted to shift a little bit because I feel like if I didn't get to cover a little bit around your professional career as well as what you're doing now, it would be such a pity because your story, just the incredibleness behind your story continues way past, you coming up and pursuing career as a professional fighter. So I feel like a lot of people who listen to this are very curious to know what it feels like to step into a boxing ring and face someone under the lights in the square circle. And I was curious if you could just describe what that feeling is like.
Well, it's an amazingly empowering feeling, but it's something that you do your whole life. So it becomes kind of second nature in a way. However, obviously leading up to fights, it's an incredible feeling of responsibility and of pressure and pressure to win and then to win in an impressive way. And there's really a whole array of emotions that go through your mind when you get into the ring, and you have to be of a certain mindset and of a certain and have certain goals in mind and have certain things that you're fighting for to be able to and kind of forget about everything else and really have in your mind, if need be, you'll leave your life in the ring. I mean, to be successful and to kind of really give it your all, that's the mindset that you have to really go to war. That's been my mindset. And training camp, the gruelingness of training camp prepares you for that experience. The running, the sparring, the training, the aches, the pains, making weight, all that prepares you for that experience.
As a professional fighter, would you say the battle in the fight happens before the fight, or would you say the fight really happens the night of the fight? Because a lot of people say that the training camp is much harder than the fight itself.
Well, training camp is definitely harder than the fight itself most of the times, or many of the times. But but dealing with the mental pressure and the mental, the challenges of performing on a given night at a given time, in front of people, being on TV, all those things put a lot of pressure on a person, and to be able to put what you've learned in the gym, and I've seen many times where guys that are subpar fighters, let's say, in sparring, beat up on world champions, but when they get to the fight, raise the occasion and do what they need to do. And the guys that are, so are not able to leave all that in the gym. And when people are watching, when the cameras are on, are not able to really turn on, the magic, so to say. So many components go into being able to perform in the ring. And I want to say one of the most important components for me, kind of crossing over, using my experience as a boxer into what I'm doing now as a promoter, is when someone has had a successful amateur career, usually that's a good sign that they'll be able to be successful in the pros.
Okay. Everyone always thinks like boxers are fearless. So were you ever scared before you would get into the ring and fight?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of emotions that you experience, but I think fear is one of them. Mike Tyson was like the best man on the planet. Used to cry before fights and used to have a lot of emotions, even as a world champion, in the locker room. A friend of mine, his name is John Scully, has a saying, basically, that the weight in the locker room leading up to the fight would strip most people of whatever macho feelings they think they had. That's really the hardest thing is 2 hours before the fight in the locker room. That is the hardest thing. That is the hardest way.
Same with an amateur, there's a lot more pressure as a professional.
As a professional, it's more significant. As an amateur, sometimes you go to into these tournaments, and you fight every day. It's like an elimination process. So First day, maybe you're nervous, but then second, third day, it's like because you become used to the feeling and you fight so often that you don't really feel it so much. And obviously the fights are not as long. But amateur boxing gloves are made to absorb shock, and you wear a t-shirt and you used to wear headgear. Now you don't wear headgear anymore. But amateur boxing it's a different sport in a way. In terms of the skill level is very high, but just in terms of the physicality of it, professional boxing in tough fights, it's more physical.
Makes sense. So in your professional career, you went up until the Amir Khan fight. Several years you were undefeated. So I'm curious, what was it like? When I think of your life, obviously, I feel like that was another big moment of adversity, I guess. And I'm curious if you can just sort of share a little bit about what that journey was like.
That was extremely challenging for me. I mean, I got married 3 months before that. Obviously I had hopes of winning the fight. And, even the thought of losing, I didn't think they would be as bad as it was. So that really challenged my belief system, really. And talking about, everything for the better and what's the meaning of it. And I really had a hard time kind of figuring out why it happened the way it happened.
I would imagine that, now as a promoter, you have probably a perspective that other dominant world champion fighters or undefeated fighters maybe don't have that you can impart or share this wisdom with them?
Yeah, well, I mean, so my first fight back after the Amir Khan fight was the fight that I promoted. So, that kind of opened the door for what I'm doing now. So even though kind of there was disappointment and kind of one door closed in a way, another door opened. So my first event was September 1st, 2010. I was an active participant in that one as a fighter. That was about 9 months after that fight.
That was in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
Right? I want to say I was there.
I wish it was. Were you there?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Did you have Matisyahu walk you out?
Not for that one.
Not for that one? I was there for numerous ones following that fight. So after the Khan fight, did you still have aspirations of fighting for the world title again?
Yes, and I actually signed to fight for the WBA welterweight title about 2 years after that fight. And I signed it, and it was supposed to be promoted in Madison Square Garden. And then there were difficulties with it for reasons outside of my control, and the fight never happened. But I still have the signed contract for that fight.
Got it. So you already have your promotion at this stage, correct?
Yeah, but I was really promoting mostly for myself.
Okay. At that point, were you thinking, like, I want to create a plan for life after boxing?
Yes, for sure. So, one of the challenging things that happened after the Amir Khan fight is I made some money, but then I bought an apartment. I first got married. All the expenses of a new life, and about 8-9 months later, I had very little money, almost no money left, and that was extremely challenging for me because I had a new family, and and I didn't have an opportunity for a big fight. So that's really why I promoted my first show. I made a little bit of money, and then when I was fighting for these events, I was staying active, making some money, but then there were gaps. There were gaps of time when I couldn't fight because of different things where I couldn't put a show together, and I was looking for work. I was looking for a job, and as a fighter, I knew a lot of wealthy people, a lot of influential people. Everybody wanted, before I fought Amir Khan, a lot of people were my friends. Go out to dinner, go out to parties and events, and then, it's like people really stopped returning my phone call, and if they would return my phone call, they would be nice, but would not be helpful. I was looking for jobs, any kind of, I was just because I was desperate to pay my bills, to pay my mortgage, and I was unsuccessful. And I became a personal trainer for a little bit and did some training at a local school and whatever. And at the same time, was trying to find ways to build my promotional business.
I see. I guess now your promotional business has grown at an incredible rate. If you think about it, you're doing it less than a decade, and your roster of fighters is extremely impressive. So I guess at what point do things start to take that turn, I guess, when you were able to be like, okay, I have something.
So I'm really doing it as a company for about 6 years. So first of all, in the beginning, I had no money to promote professional shows. It was around the time that the Golden Boys signed an exclusive deal with the Barclays Center to bring boxing. And I actually fought on the first event. The opening of the Barclays Center, I fought on that event. The brand of Brooklyn and boxing was coming together, and it was popular and it was hot. So I saw a lot of potential in professional boxing for a company, but I just didn't have the funding to do it. So I first started to promote amateur boxing shows at Fight Factory Gym. So I would have Brooklyn Brawl amateur boxing shows. And we had 2 events, I think, and we had the third one scheduled. And as luck would have it, amateur boxing, for like 3 days, they pulled the license. Like AIBA pulled the license for USA Boxing, and the events weren't licensed. So our USA Boxing event, local amateur boxing event, lost licensing, and there were no fights. And there was, when you're getting started, that's a tough pill to swallow. What I just want to say with this is that I took whatever was available to me, and what was available to me was to promote amateur boxing shows, and we did, and we made a little bit of money, and then started to promote professional boxing again. Meaning that I was really had a vision and believed in it, and I just wanted to do whatever I can to push that agenda forward, to push the business model forward. And that's what I did in the beginning.
Do you mind sharing what today what Salida Promotions has become and what you've built it to over the last 6 years?
Yeah, so we promote some of the best fighters in the world. Clarissa Shields, 2 times Olympic gold medalist, undisputed middleweight world champion. Co-promote Jarrell Miller, Otto Whalen, Shoja Kanagashi. We have about 30 fighters, most of them world rated, some world champions. Before the Corona virus hit, we had 3 televised shows, and the last USA televised event, boxing televised event before the shutdown, we had a Showbox March 13th. So we work with some of the best fighters in the world, and our stable, continuously grows. Obviously, we don't know what. I feel like to some extent the sports world is going to change as a result of this, but we'll see what happens once we come out of this, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people find you or get a hold of you if they want or find out more information?
So people can follow me on my social media, Instagram, Dimitri_Salita, Salita_promotions for my company address, and the same on Twitter. It's actually DSalita and Salita Promotions. And follow our news, follow our fighters, and attend our events whenever that's possible.
And this all ends. Well, thank you so much for the additional time, the podcast, really opening up and I guess, having an honest conversation about really challenging times. I'm really grateful for that and all the knowledge that you shared. And I'm sure this podcast is going to inspire a lot of people. It definitely inspired
Thanks,
me.
Danny. Always good to communicate with you and great to see you doing great things.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dimitri.